Some people meet the world when they are still very young. America's Got Talent gave the world a chance to see a small girl with a big voice, Celine Tam. She stood on a huge stage, singing songs many adults are afraid to try. People smiled, judges were moved, and millions watched a child follow a dream. But growing up in front of the world can also be heavy. Behind the applause, there are long days, high hopes, and the quiet weight of expectations. As the years passed, her voice continued to grow, but so did the pressures around her. And somewhere between childhood and ambition, one quiet question began to linger. How does a young girl protect her happiness when the whole world is listening? Most people first heard her voice when she was only 9 years old. A small girl walked onto the stage of America's Got Talent and sang a song that many adult singers avoid. The audience saw confidence. The judges saw rare talent. And within minutes, the world began calling her a star. But what many people did not see was the path that brought her there. Before the applause, there was a childhood shaped by music, long practice hours, and a family that believed her voice could go further than most imagined. Opportunities came quickly. Expectations came even faster. And as her performances began spreading across the internet, a quiet question slowly started to follow her journey. Was this simply a young girl chasing a dream, or the beginning of something much bigger than childhood itself? That question begins long before the bright lights of the stage. Before millions of people heard her voice, Celine Tam was simply a young girl growing up in Hong Kong. Her childhood was closely connected to music. Her father, Dr. Steve Tam, worked as a music teacher and vocal coach. Inside their home, songs were not just entertainment. They were part of daily life. Music lessons, vocal exercises, and recordings were common sounds in the background. For many children, early life revolves around games, cartoons, and school activities. For Celine, music slowly became one of the central parts of her identity. Her name itself carried meaning. She was named after the famous singer Celine Dion. From an early age, she listened to Dion's powerful ballads. The songs were emotional and technically difficult, yet young Celine showed unusual interest in them. At first, singing was playful. She copied melodies she heard at home. Her father noticed that she could stay on pitch and hold long notes even at a very young age. That ability stood out quickly. Instead of pushing her immediately toward competition, her family focused on practice and learning. Her father often guided her through vocal exercises, helping her understand breathing, tone, and control. The training was structured but still connected to the natural joy she felt while singing. But talent rarely stays unnoticed for long. Small local performances started appearing. Community events, school activities, and local singing contests gave her opportunities to stand in front of audiences. These were not major stages. Most of them were simple gatherings where families and small crowds watched. Yet something interesting happened during these performances. People were often surprised by the size and control of her voice. The contrast between her age and the emotional power of the songs created a strong reaction. Listeners sometimes paused in disbelief before realizing that the singer was still a child. Soon, short videos of her singing began appearing online. The internet allowed performances from Hong Kong to travel much further than local audiences. Slowly, more viewers discovered her voice. At first, the attention felt positive and encouraging. Friends, teachers, and viewers praised her ability. For a child, that kind of support can feel exciting and motivating. It made singing even more enjoyable. But attention can also change the way people around a young talent begin thinking. Adults started imagining bigger stages, competitions, television shows, international opportunities. Conversations about the future slowly entered family discussions. Celine herself was still focused on singing because it felt natural to her. The idea of global recognition was still distant. Yet the path around her was beginning to form. When a child shows exceptional ability, the world often begins planning the next step before the child fully understands what that step might mean. And in this case, that next step would soon bring her voice far beyond Hong Kong. But the journey toward international attention would introduce something new, a level of. In 2017, a 9-year-old singer from Hong Kong stepped onto one of the most recognizable talent stages in television. For Celine Tam, the moment marked a turning point that would introduce her voice to millions of viewers around the world. The stage belonged to America's Got Talent, a competition known for discovering performers from very different backgrounds. Every season, singers, magicians, dancers, and unusual acts traveled long distances hoping for one moment in front of the judges. For Celine, the journey from Hong Kong to the American stage was already a significant step. She was still very young, far from home, and entering a competition watched across many countries. But when she began singing, the room became quiet. Her song choice carried weight. She performed My Heart Will Go On, the iconic song made famous by Celine Dion. It was a bold choice. The song requires emotional control, vocal strength, and confidence that many adult singers struggle to maintain. Yet the young performer approached the song with calm focus. As her voice moved through the melody, the audience began reacting almost immediately. Some leaned forward in surprise. Others exchanged quiet looks of disbelief. The contrast between her small presence on stage and the strength of her voice created a moment that felt memorable even before the performance ended. When the final note arrived, the applause was strong. The judges responded with praise, noting the clarity of her voice and the courage required to attempt such a demanding song. Viewers watching from home soon began sharing clips of the performance online. Within days, her audition was circulating widely across social media platforms. For many people, it was their first time hearing her voice. For Celine, it was the first time performing in front of a truly global audience. But a televised competition moves quickly. Each successful round creates higher expectations for the next performance. Contestants must continue proving themselves, sometimes under growing pressure. For experienced performers, that challenge is already difficult. For a child, the emotional weight can be even greater. As the competition continued, Celine prepared new songs and returned to the stage again. Each appearance carried more attention than the last. Fans began following her journey through the show, curious about how far she might go. Behind the scenes, preparation became more intense. Rehearsals, interviews, and production schedules filled her time. The experience was exciting, but it also introduced a faster rhythm of life than she had known before. For a young singer who once performed mostly in small community settings, the environment was dramatically different. Bright lights, television cameras, a large audience, judges offering public feedback. These elements created opportunity, but they also changed the meaning of each performance. What once felt like simple joy in singing was slowly becoming something connected to competition and global attention. And as the show continued, one unexpected moment would soon shift the direction of her journey in a way that few viewers fully understood at the time. After her breakthrough audition, Celine Tam quickly became one of the most talked-about young talents on America's Got Talent. Videos of her performances were shared worldwide, and social media buzz made her a familiar name in households far beyond Hong Kong. For Celine, the sudden visibility was a new kind of experience. She had moved from local stages and small audiences to performing under the scrutiny of millions. Every note she sang, every expression, was now watched, discussed, and celebrated online. The warmth of applause came alongside the quiet weight of expectation. Her daily life shifted. Long rehearsal hours replaced much of her free time, and travel schedules became routine. Interviews, coaching sessions, and production meetings filled days that once had room for play or casual schoolwork. Her family stayed close, helping her navigate the new pace, but even supportive guidance could not remove the subtle tension that comes with performing under constant observation. Celine's emotions were complex. She felt pride in her accomplishments, excitement at the opportunity to share her voice, and the deep satisfaction of inspiring others. Yet alongside those feelings, there was a subtle strain, the awareness that each performance carried the implicit expectation of excellence. For a child, it can be hard to separate personal joy from the anticipation of judgment. Fans noticed every performance, and their reactions often influenced how others viewed her. Each round in the competition felt heavier than the last. Judges' praise could bring confidence, but it also highlighted the growing pressure. Celine had learned early how to channel focus into her singing, yet the demands of public attention were different from the safe environment of home or small recitals. Even at moments of rest, the awareness of the spotlight lingered. Messages from fans, online discussions, and the anticipation of the next performance were constant reminders that her journey was no longer private. Childhood routines, schoolwork, playtime, family meals were often interwoven with preparation for the next stage appearance. Yet, through all this, music remained central to her identity. Singing continued to bring her personal satisfaction, but it also became a form of responsibility. Each note carried the weight of audience expectation, and with that weight came a growing need for emotional resilience. This stage of her life introduced a critical tension, balancing the joy of performing with the demands of being seen by the world. For a young girl, understanding that balance was an evolving process, one that required both maturity and support from those around her. And as she continued to navigate this new reality, the question began to grow quietly in her mind. How much of her singing would remain about herself, and how much would belong to everyone else watching? As Celine Tam moved further through America's Got Talent, the attention surrounding her grew louder. The applause that once felt purely joyful began to carry an unspoken responsibility. Every performance was no longer just an expression of her love for singing, it was also a measure of how far the world expected her to go. Her family continued to guide her carefully. Her father, a seasoned music teacher, remained her anchor, helping her refine technique and navigate rehearsals. Yet even with their support, the growing expectations were difficult to escape. Every comment from a judge, every fan video online, and every social media mention contributed to a subtle sense that her talent was no longer just hers. It belonged, in some small way, to the people watching. Celine herself was learning quickly about the dynamics of public attention. While her performances were full of youthful passion, she was also beginning to notice the patterns of what drew praise. Certain songs, certain high notes, certain expressions prompted stronger reactions. Without fully realizing it, she began adjusting her choices to meet these expectations, carefully balancing authenticity with the understanding that audiences were watching closely. The emotional complexity of this time was quiet but profound. She felt pride and excitement at her accomplishments, yet alongside those feelings came moments of fatigue and self-consciousness. A young child learning to navigate fame may not fully articulate stress, but the experience subtly shapes confidence, resilience, and the way a performer sees herself. Life outside the stage became another area of subtle tension. Travel schedules, long rehearsals, and media obligations intruded on ordinary childhood experiences. Simple things, school assignments, playing with friends, or quiet afternoons at home, required adjustments. The rhythm of daily life began to revolve around performances and appearances, a shift that sometimes left little space for personal reflection. Despite this, her love for music remained central. Singing continued to bring comfort and joy, but the stakes had quietly shifted. Success now came with a sense of duty. Each audience, each judge, each online viewer added weight to what once had been simply playful singing. Celine's story at this stage illustrates a universal tension for young prodigies, the balance between nurturing talent and protecting a child's emotional well-being. The pressure is rarely loud or dramatic. It is the quiet awareness that others are counting on every note, every performance, every decision. And as she continued along this path, the question lingered subtly. In a world that expects so much from her voice, how can she preserve the pure joy of singing that first drew her to music? As the competition ended and Celine Tam continued to develop as a young artist, the spotlight she had stepped into as a child did not fade. The world had seen her talent, and with that visibility came both admiration and expectation. Growing up while known by millions introduced challenges that went beyond music. Adolescence brought a new layer of complexity. Celine's voice matured naturally, and she began to notice subtle changes in her abilities, preferences, and self-expression. At the same time, public attention did not pause for these changes. Fans continued to associate her with the performances she gave at 9 or 10, often expecting the same exact style or intensity. Adjusting to this became an emotional balancing act, wanting to explore new directions while understanding that many people were still watching the child version of her. Daily life continued under scrutiny. School routines, family commitments, and moments of normal childhood curiosity were often observed or reported by fans online. Celine learned early that privacy was limited, and even small mistakes or off moments could be noticed. Navigating friendships, learning, and personal growth required careful attention to both internal feelings and external perceptions. Despite these pressures, Celine maintained her love for music. Singing remained a private joy as much as a public skill. Yet the lines between personal passion and public expectation blurred. She began understanding that her talent could inspire others, but also that it could create a quiet tension between what she wanted and what others wanted from her performances. Family support continued to be a central anchor. Her parents offered guidance, helping her make decisions about song choices, performances, and balancing schoolwork with her career. Their influence was protective, but they also had to make choices about exposure, competition, and media engagement, all of which shaped how Celine experienced adolescence. This stage of her journey revealed an important psychological dynamic: the challenge of growing up in an environment that constantly evaluates, applauds, and compares. For a young person, understanding identity becomes more complicated when it is tied to public approval. Celine began forming her own sense of self, separate from the accolades and opinions that surrounded her. She also became more reflective about her purpose in music. Singing was no longer only about mastering technique or impressing audiences. It was increasingly about expressing who she was becoming as a young person. These reflections often happened quietly, in moments away from cameras and crowds, allowing her to maintain a personal connection to the art that first captivated her. And as she navigated this period of growth, a new question quietly emerged: how can she remain true to herself while honoring the expectations of the world that discovered her? As Celine Tam grew older, the world that had once marveled at her youthful performances became a backdrop to her personal journey. She was no longer just the young girl on America's Got Talent. She was a teenager with her own ideas, emotions, and aspirations. The process of finding her own voice now extended beyond singing. It became about discovering who she wanted to be, both as an artist and as a person. The pressures of public expectation continued to influence her choices. Every performance, whether online or on stage, invited attention and judgment. Fans often remembered the extraordinary child they had watched years before, sometimes overlooking the subtle changes in her voice and style. For Celine, this created a quiet tension between her past image and her present identity. At the same time, she began exploring music on her own terms. Songwriting, experimenting with new genres, and selecting pieces that resonated with her personal experiences became more central. These choices allowed her to reconnect with the joy of music, the kind of joy that initially inspired her to sing. It was a delicate balance, navigating the expectations of an audience while staying true to her evolving artistic instincts. Family support remained crucial. Her parents helped guide career decisions, but they also encouraged moments of normalcy, time to relax, spend with friends, or engage in activities unrelated to performance. These spaces allowed Celine to process her emotions and reflect on what she truly wanted, separate from the applause and attention. The psychological journey was gradual. Confidence grew alongside awareness. Celine recognized that maintaining authenticity sometimes required saying no, adjusting her schedule, or choosing projects that aligned with her values. This stage of growth taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of self-awareness in an environment that often measured success by public reaction rather than personal fulfillment. She also learned to observe her own feelings. Moments of nervousness before performances, excitement at new opportunities, and even frustration at limitations became indicators of her inner state. By listening to these signals, she could make choices that preserved both her artistic integrity and emotional well-being. Through this process, music became both a mirror and a guide, a way to understand herself and navigate the complexities of life in the public eye. While the world continued to notice her talent, Celine slowly began to notice herself. The balance between public recognition and personal growth shaped the next stage of her journey, one where she could define her voice beyond the expectations placed on her as a child prodigy. And as she stepped forward into this new phase, the question remained quietly present. How can she honor the dreams that once carried her into the spotlight while building a life and career that truly feel her own?